Right now, in a museum behind glass, there is a piece of clay smaller than your hand. It is around 5,000 years old, and pressed into its surface, in tiny wedge-shaped marks, is a description of exactly what happens to you after you die. Not a poem about it, not a prayer, a description, step by step, stage by stage, written with the flat, practical detail of someone who had been there, taken notes, and come back. The people who carved it were the Sumerians, the first real civilization on Earth. They gave us writing, the wheel, the city, the first written laws. And when that same cold engineering mind turned toward death, it did not reach for a vague heaven or a fiery hell. It described a mechanism, a process, with gates, with gatekeepers, with rules, and at the very end, something that stops you in your tracks. A method for taking the human soul, stripping it clean, and sending it back, recycled, with no memory of the life before. And they were clear about one thing. This was not, they said, an accident of nature. It was designed, built, by someone. For 100 years, scholars have quietly filed these tablets under mythology, the superstition of a primitive people, but read them plainly, line by line, exactly as they were written, and something far colder looks back at you, because pieces of it echo ideas we assume are far more modern than a slab of Bronze Age clay. So what does the tablet actually say? And how did anyone in 3000 BC know to write it down? Let's read it together. To understand the tablet, you first have to understand the people who carved it, because almost everything about them is stranger than most people realize. Go back 6,000 years to the flat, hot plain of southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates. For most of human history up to that point, people had lived in small, scattered groups. Simple. And then, in this one stretch of river mud, something switched on. The Sumerians appear in the record almost fully formed. Not a slow, gentle climb from huts to towns over tens of thousands of years, but a burst. Cities holding tens of thousands of people. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, written law, centuries before Hammurabi. Irrigation, engineering, monumental temples, a working bureaucracy. They gave us the wheel. They gave us the 60-minute hour and the 360-degree circle. You are using their math every single time you look at a clock. Mainstream archaeology has spent a century trying to explain how a people went from almost nothing to all of that so quickly. And if you read the explanations honestly, they are still arguing about it. The Sumerians themselves had an explanation, and we will get to it because it is not the one you were taught in school. But first, the thing that makes any of this knowable at all: the writing. The Sumerians wrote on clay, wet clay, pressed with the cut end of a reed, leaving little wedge-shaped marks we now call cuneiform, the oldest known writing on Earth. And here is the accident of history that changed everything. Paper burns, parchment rots, hard drives die, but clay? When a Sumerian city burned down, and they burned often, the fire did not destroy the tablets, it baked them. It hardened them into something close to permanent. Which means that, unlike almost every other ancient people, the Sumerians did not fade into rumor and legend. They left a paper trail, an enormous one. Hundreds of thousands of clay tablets have been pulled out of the sands of Iraq. Receipts, contracts, letters, school homework, king lists, medical texts, star charts, poems, and prayers. An entire civilization talking to us in its own words. And here is the part few people know. A huge share of those tablets have never been fully translated. They sit in the basements of museums, in drawers, in crates, waiting. We are right now still reading the mail of the first civilization on Earth. The greatest single hoard came from the buried library of an Assyrian king named Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. Tens of thousands of tablets burned and collapsed into the earth, carrying copies of texts that were already ancient in his own day. That is how much of this survived. Later peoples, the Babylonians and Assyrians, treated the old Sumerian writings almost the way we treat scripture. They copied them, studied them, and handed them down for thousands of years. The ideas mattered enough to keep, and we can read it. That is the crucial point. This is not guesswork. It is not psychics. It is not somebody claiming to feel the vibrations of ancient stone. In the 1800s, scholars cracked cuneiform using a massive inscription carved into a cliff in Persia, written in 3 languages at once. The same basic trick the Rosetta Stone pulled for Egypt. Once one language gave up the code, the rest fell into place. Today, a trained scholar can read a 4,000-year-old Sumerian tablet about as reliably as you can read a newspaper. So when I tell you what these tablets say, understand what I am handing you. Not a fringe theory, not a psychic's guess, a translation. Keep that in mind for everything that follows. These are not the fever dreams of cave dwellers. They are the carefully recorded beliefs of the most advanced people of their age, engineers, astronomers, and lawmakers, written down in plain, matter-of-fact language and then preserved by pure accident for 5,000 years. And when those engineers wrote about death, they did not write like poets reaching for comfort. They wrote like men documenting a system they believed was real. A system with parts, with stages, with rules. But to follow what they recorded, you have to let go of almost everything you assume about the line between a body and a soul. Because the Sumerians did not picture a human being the way you do. To them, you are not one thing. You are several things stacked together. And when you die, only some of them actually stop. That distinction is where the real strangeness begins. Ask a modern person what a human being is, and you usually get one of 2 answers. Either you're a body, just meat and electricity, and when it stops, you stop. Or you're a body with a soul, a single invisible thing that flies off somewhere when you die. One or the other. The Sumerians would have found both of those almost childishly simple. To them, a human being was not one thing, and not 2. It was an assembly, a stack of separate components, layered together, each with its own origin and its own fate when the body failed. And the way they described it reads less like religion and more like a specification sheet. Start with the body itself. The Sumerians called it clay, and they meant that almost literally. In their creation texts, humanity is molded from clay mixed with something else, the blood or the flesh of a slain god, earth plus a divine ingredient. When you die, the clay part does exactly what clay does. It goes back to the ground. No mystery there. That part they weren't worried about. It was the other ingredient that mattered, the divine part, because mixed into that clay, according to the tablets, was a component that did not die with the body, a spirit the Sumerians called the Giddim. Think of it as the part of you that continues, the thing that detaches when the body fails and goes on to face the process this whole story is about. And crucially, the Giddim did not come from the earth. It came from the god. It was the piece of the divine that had been baked into the human being from the first day of creation. Now sit with the implication, because the Sumerians clearly did. If the surviving part of you is a fragment of a god, installed on purpose at the moment of manufacture, then the human being was not an accident that happened to grow a soul. The human being was built, and the surviving part was built in. There is a detail that shows how literally they took this. The Giddim, once it left the body, still had needs. It had to be fed. Offerings of food and water, poured out by the living by name at the proper times. A tended ghost rested. A forgotten one turned hungry and angry and came back. A restless dead thing that could sicken the living until someone remembered it. To the Sumerians, the dead were not gone. They were relocated and still dependent. And listen, and if you've come this far with me, down into the wiring underneath the oldest story we have, then you already know what kind of channel this is. We do this every single day. We take the version of the past you were handed, and we go back to what the evidence actually says. If that's what you're here for, do me one favor and subscribe. It's free, and it keeps this stuff coming to you. There's a whole crowd of people who would never admit out loud that they lie awake thinking about this exact question. And quietly, this is the channel for them. Because here is why the wiring matters. If a piece of you survives, the obvious question is the next one. Survives to go where? And to do what? This is where the Sumerians get unnervingly specific. They did not treat death as a door you simply walk through into mystery. They treated it as a system, a design process with fixed stages and fixed rules, run by specific beings whose job was to keep it running. They even had a word for the machinery behind reality itself: the me. The me were something like the divine decrees, the underlying programs that governed how everything worked: kingship, craft, love, war, and yes, death. Not laws written on a page, more like source code, the rules the universe was running on. And one of the most important of them all was the fixed decree of death itself. To the Sumerians, in other words, dying was not the moment your program ended. It was the moment your program got handed to a different system, one that already knew exactly what to do with you. And they believed that system was not natural. Mortality in their texts was not simply the way of things. It was a fate assigned to humanity, a decision made by someone that human beings would die while the gods would not. The end of your life was quite literally a design choice. They wrote down what that system looked like: its geography, its gatekeepers, its rules of entry, rules so absolute that they could not be broken even by a god. And we know they wrote it down because one of them went in to test it. A goddess walked into the land of the dead on purpose, and the tablets recorded step by step everything that was done to her at the door. Her name was Inanna, and in the Sumerian world, she was about as far from a candidate for death as it is possible to be. Inanna was the goddess of love and war and the morning star, one of the most powerful figures in the entire pantheon, worshipped for thousands of years, later known to the Babylonians as Ishtar. She had everything: beauty, power, status, the favor of the other gods. And for reasons the tablets only hint at, she decided to do the one thing even a god was not supposed to do. She decided to go down into the land of the dead, alive, on purpose. The Sumerians called that place the Kur, the land of no return. A great city beneath the earth, ruled by Inanna's own sister, a grim and terrible queen named Ereshkigal, mistress of the dead. And the Kur was not fire and torment, the way later religions would picture hell. In a quiet way, it was worse. It was a place of dust and gray silence, where the dead crouched in the dark, clothed like birds in feathers, eating dust and drinking muddy water. No reward, no punishment. Just a dim, hungry existence that went on, with kings and beggars ending in the same gray hall. That was the destination. That is what Inanna was walking into with her eyes open. Before she went, Inanna did something telling. She prepared. She dressed herself in her full power. The crown of the step on her head, lapis beads at her throat, a royal robe, the measuring rod and line of authority in her hand, paint on her eyes. 7 objects, 7 pieces of divine power. The me, made physical, worn on her body like armor. And she left instructions with her most trusted servant. If I do not return in 3 days, go to the other gods and beg them to save me. She knew, in other words, that she might not walk back out. Then she knocked on the gate of the underworld. The gatekeeper was a figure named Neti, and he did not simply open the door. He went to his queen, Ereshkigal, and asked what to do. And Ereshkigal gave the order that sits at the very heart of the story. She said, "Bolt the 7 gates of the underworld, then open them to her, one at a time. And as she passes through each one, take something from her." This is the part that has echoed down 5,000 years. Inanna comes to the first gate. It opens, and the gatekeeper lifts the crown from her head. She asks what is happening, and she is given the same answer she will hear again and again at every gate. "Be silent, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." At the second gate, they take the beads from her neck. At the third, the stones from her breast. At the fourth, the ornament from her chest. At the 5th, the gold ring from her hand. At the 6th, the measuring rod and line, the very symbol of her authority. And at the 7th gate, they take her royal robe, the last thing she had. 7 gates, 7 stages, and at each one, another layer of who she was is stripped away and left behind. Her power, her rank, her identity, her protection, piece by piece, until the goddess who walked in wearing the full regalia of heaven stands at the bottom in the throne room of the dead with nothing, naked, bowed low, reduced to the bare, undefended core of herself. Stop and notice what that actually is. That is not a poem about grief. That is a procedure, a staged descent, gate by gate, in which everything external to you, everything you wore, everything you carried, everything you called yourself, is methodically removed before you are permitted to reach the end. The Sumerians were describing death as a controlled stripping down, a processing. Anyone who has ever sat beside a dying person feels the faint echo of it. You arrive with everything. You are relieved of it, one item at a time. And what waited at the bottom for Inanna was not peace. It was judgment. She was brought before the 7 judges of the underworld, the Anunnaki of that place, who fixed her with what the text calls the eye of death. And in that instant, the most powerful goddess in the sky was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat hung on a hook on the wall. That is what the tablet says happens when you pass through the gates. But Inanna was a goddess, and her story had a second half. A rescue, a price, and a substitution that tells us something even darker about how the Sumerians believed the whole system stayed in balance. Because the dead, it turns out, do not let you leave for free. Someone always has to take your place. For 3 days and 3 nights, Inanna hung on that hook, a corpse in the dark. Above, her servant Ninshubur did exactly what she had been told. She went from god to god, begging for help. And here's the first hard truth of the story. Most of them said no. The great sky gods shrugged. She knew the risks, they said. She went down on her own. The land of the dead keeps what it takes. Let her stay. Only one god broke ranks. Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, the very same god who, in the creation texts, had designed human beings in the first place. Of course it was him, the engineer. The one who built the system was the one who knew how to reach back into it. And notice how he does it. He does not storm the gates. He does not fight. He scrapes a little dirt from under his fingernails, and from that dirt he fashions 2 small beings. Not men, not women, not alive in the ordinary sense. Creatures made for one specific task. He gives them 2 substances, the food of life and the water of life, and he sends them down with precise instructions. Read that plainly, and it sounds less like a prayer and more like a repair job. A specialist sending in 2 purpose-built units, carrying 2 specific compounds to restart something that had stopped. They slip through the 7 gates because they are nobody and they carry nothing, so there is nothing to take from them. They find Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, moaning in some deep distress, and instead of fighting her, they simply echo her. They groan when she groans. They mirror her pain. Disarmed and grateful, she offers them a gift, anything they want, and they ask for one thing only, the corpse hanging on the hook. They take Inanna's body. They sprinkle it with the food of life and the water of life, and the goddess breathes again. The dead is made living. But this is where the system shows its teeth. Because there is a rule in the underworld deeper than all the others, and not even Enki can break it. No one who has entered the land of the dead may return to the world above unless they leave someone behind in their place. The books have to balance, a life for a life. If Inanna comes up, something must go down. So the demons of the underworld, the Gala, beings the text says, know no food, no drink, take no bribes and feel no mercy, come up with her, not to punish her, to collect, to make sure the debt is paid. They follow her through the world and their message is simple. Choose someone. And this is the part that turns the myth into something colder. They come first to her faithful servant, Ninshubur, still in mourning, in the dirt, filthy with grief for her mistress. Inanna says no, not her. They come to her 2 sons, also mourning, also in rags. No, not them. And then they come to her husband, Dumuzi. And Dumuzi is not mourning at all. He is seated on a fine throne, in clean and beautiful robes, entirely at ease, as though his wife's death had been a convenience. Inanna looks at him, and she does to him exactly what was done to her. She fixes him with the eye of death. She hands him to the demons. Take him, she says. Take him away. That is the price of her return. Her own husband, dragged down to hang where she had hung. Think about what that rule really is. It is not cruelty for its own sake. It is conservation. The underworld runs on a strict, almost mathematical balance. The count of the dead cannot simply drop because someone clever found a way out. Every exit demands an entry, The dead are a quantity that has to be kept level. That is not how you describe a vague land of spirits. That is how you describe a system with a fixed capacity, one that has to be actively managed and kept in balance by beings whose entire job is to make the numbers work. The Sumerians could not leave it perfectly cruel, so there is a mercy folded into the ending. Dumuzi's sister loves him enough to offer to take his place for half of every year. And so it is settled. Half the year Dumuzi is below, and the world goes dry and dies. Half the year he is released, and the world turns green again. The seasons themselves in the Sumerian mind were the visible heartbeat of that trade. A soul going down, a soul coming up, over and over, forever. Hold on to that idea. A soul going down and a soul coming back up on a cycle. Because the tablets do not stop with gods trading places to explain the winner. They apply the very same logic to you. Go back to the 7 gates for a second, because something happened there that we walked straight past. At each gate, Inanna lost a piece of herself, her crown, her jewels, her robe, her rank. By the time she reached the bottom, she was not a goddess anymore. She had been stripped of every marker of who she had been, reduced to a bare, anonymous thing hanging on a hook. Now ask the obvious question. If that is what the descent does to a god, peel away identity, layer by layer, until nothing personal is left, what does it do to you? This is where the tablets, read closely, begin to describe something that sounds less like an afterlife and more like a process with an output. Because the Sumerian dead do not simply rest forever in the gray city. Look at the whole shape of what we have covered. A soul goes down. A soul, on a cycle, comes back up. Dumuzi, half the year below, half the year above, down and up, forever. The Sumerians saw existence as a wheel, not a straight line, and on that wheel the descent has a function. It does not only store you, it processes you, it strips you down, your name, your memories, everything that made you a specific person, until what remains is the bare divine spark, the raw material, clean enough to be used again, recycled, sent back, with no memory of what came before. Sit with that, because it is the quiet horror underneath the whole system. Not that death is the end, that death is not the end, and that what comes next is not rest and not reward, but reprocessing. The you that you are, your name, your loves, your grief, this exact life. That is the part that gets peeled away at the gates and discarded. What continues is the component underneath. Wiped, blank, fitted into a new body that will never know it lived before. And if you are asking who would build a system like that, the Sumerians answer without hesitation. The same beings who built us in the first place. We have been circling them this whole time. The Anunnaki. In the creation texts, they are the ones who came down, who worked the earth, and who, when the labor grew too hard, decided to manufacture a worker to carry the load for them. That worker was us, humanity molded from clay and the blood of a god, built for a purpose, to serve. And the tablets are blunt about it. We were not created to be free, or eternal, or even especially cherished. We were created to work. Mortality was part of the specification. The gods kept unending life for themselves and handed us death. The creation story is oddly specific about it. The lesser gods, worn out from digging the rivers and the mines, throw down their tools and refuse to work. Enki proposes a fix, build a replacement. A god is put to death, his flesh and blood mixed into clay, and from that mixture, the birth goddess shapes the first humans, made to pick up the tools the gods had dropped. Now lay the two ideas side by side. A species engineered as a labor force, and a death system that strips that species of memory and sends it back around again. Read together, they stop sounding like two separate myths and start sounding like a single design. A workforce that renews itself endlessly, that never accumulates too much knowledge, that never remembers enough to ask why it is here or who set it to work. A closed loop. Bodies wear out. The divine spark is recovered, wiped, and reinstalled. The Sumerians even had a phrase for the whole arrangement. They called it the fate that was decreed for mankind. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this channel does not sell you certainty it has not earned. That last leap, from what the tablets plainly say to what it might actually mean, is exactly where the argument gets loud. And in the next part, I am going to give you the other side of it, fair and square. But before I do, hold on to how many places this same story turns up. Man made from clay or from dust, made by more than one maker. Let us make man, says the very first book of the Bible, in the plural, and no one ever quite explains the plural. A lost paradise. A great flood sent to wipe humanity out, with a single warned survivor who builds a boat. These are not only Sumerian, they are in Genesis, in the book of Enoch, in the flood stories of cultures that never met and never traded a word. The Sumerians simply wrote it down first, and wrote it coldest. The question is what we do with that, and that is where the honest fight begins. So let's do the thing this channel actually exists to do. Let's turn it over and look at the other side. Because I owe you that, and because the truth is more interesting than the sales pitch. Most of what you heard in the last few minutes, the Anunnaki as flesh and blood visitors, the gold mining, the genetic engineering, the soul recycling machine, most of that, in its modern form, traces back to one man. A writer named Zecharia Sitchin, who in the 1970s published a series of books claiming to have decoded the tablets and found, hidden inside them, a story of astronauts from a planet called Nibiru, who came to Earth for gold and built us as slaves. Those books sold millions. They are the source of nearly every Anunnaki documentary, every late-night podcast riff, every meme you have ever seen on the subject. And here is what you are almost never told alongside them. The people who actually read cuneiform for a living, the Assyriologists, the ones who spend their whole careers with these tablets, say Sitchin got the translations wrong. Not shaded, not debatable, wrong. The word Anunnaki does not mean those who came from heaven to earth. It means something closer to the princely offspring, the seed of the sky god, a class of gods, full stop. There is no tablet describing a planet called Nibiru swinging by on a long orbit full of astronauts. There is no clear text about gold mining aliens splicing their own DNA into apes. Read the actual Sumerian, scholars say, and the ancient-astronaut layer simply is not there. It was added on top, later, by a modern author who could not read the language. And that soul recycling machine? Here is the honest part. The clearest Sumerian texts about the dead do not actually describe reincarnation. They describe a one-way trip. The Giddim goes down to the gray city and stays there, dependent on the living, fed by offerings, but not in the plainest reading, wiped clean and posted back into a newborn. The recycling is an interpretation, stitched together from the cycle of Dumuzi, the turning of the seasons, and a certain way of squinting at the text. It is a powerful idea, but it is a reading. It is not a caption on the tablet. So the mainstream view is simple, and it deserves to be said plainly. These are myths. Religion. The Anunnaki are gods, not astronauts. The story of humans made from clay to carry the gods' labor is not a memory of genetic engineering. It is a people explaining their own hard lives, why the temple owned everything, why the work never ended, why everyone, in the end, died. The Sumerian afterlife is grim because Sumerian life was grim. And Sumer did not drop out of the sky overnight. It grew over thousands of years out of farming villages nobody ever bothered to romanticize. But the sober case has its own soft spots, which is part of why the argument never quite dies. It is fair to ask why so many peoples who never met reach for the same few images. The clay, the makers spoken of in the plural, the flood, the descent through gates. They all simply borrowed from one another is often true, and every so often it starts to strain. That is the sober case, and I think you should hold it in one hand, honestly, at full strength. But hold this in the other. Even if you strip out every alien, every spaceship, every last drop of Sitchin, what remains is still staggering. 5,000 years ago, the first people who ever learned to write took that brand new power and aimed it at the one thing none of us can see past: death. And instead of flinching, they mapped it: gates, judges, rules, a queen of the dead, a whole geography of the end. They wrote the oldest description of the afterlife in human history, the template that Egypt, Greece, and even the Bible would each, in their own way, go on to inherit. And that part is not a fringe claim. It is simply true. The flood in Genesis, the lone survivor with his boat full of animals, that story sits right there in the older Sumerian and Babylonian tablets, almost line for line. The dying god who goes below for half the year and returns with the spring, that pattern runs from Dumuzi to the Greek Persephone and onward into stories much closer to home. You do not need visitors from another planet to be unsettled by any of that. You only need to notice something quieter and harder to shake. Our oldest ancestors were already asking our newest questions, and some of the answers they carved into wet clay have never actually left us. They just changed their clothes. Here is what stays with me after all of it. We started with a piece of clay behind glass, a thing you could hold in one hand that claims to describe what happens after you die. And we have spent this whole time trying to decide whether to believe it. Whether the Anunnaki were gods or visitors, whether the soul really is stripped at the gates and sent back around, whether any of it is memory or myth or the mistranslation of a dead language. But step back far enough, and the argument almost stops mattering. Because the most unsettling thing about that tablet was never the aliens. It is the tone. Think about how we talk about death, even now, with all our science. We soften it. We say passed away, gone to a better place, at peace. We reach by instinct for comfort. The Sumerians did not. They looked straight at it and described it the way you would describe a machine. Gates, stages, gatekeepers, rules that not even a god could break. A queen who turns the mighty into meat on a hook. No comfort, no flinching. Just, this is the process. It is coming for you, and it does not care who you are. That is a profoundly adult way to face the end. And it came from the very beginning of us. And notice what they did about it. They did not simply accept the silence, they wrote. They took the newest technology any human had ever held, marks pressed into wet clay, and they used it to reach past their own deaths. To say to someone, anyone, 5,000 years down the line, here is what we believed was waiting. Here is what we feared. Do not forget us. And it worked. That is the part that stays with me. Their kings are dust. Their cities are mounds in the desert. Their gods are gone. Their language died. Their empire fell so completely that the world forgot it had ever existed. And yet, you just spent this long inside their thoughts. Their fear of the gates, their queen of the dead, the exact shape of their answer to the exact question you will face one day. They are right now in your head. Now remember what the tablet said the underworld does. It strips you of your name, your memory. Everything that made you a specific person, peeled away at the gates until nothing individual is left and sent back blank. If they were right about that, then the Sumerians themselves have already been through it. Every one of them, long ago, wiped clean and forgotten, exactly as they described. And here is the quiet irony. The one thing that escaped the gates, the one thing that was not stripped and recycled and lost, was the tablet, the words, the message. The part of them that was never clay. Maybe that was always the real technology, not the wheel, not the math. Writing, the first tool that ever let a human being do the one thing the underworld was built to prevent. To be remembered, to step out of the loop, and someday, a long time from now, everything you are will be gone too. Your name, your city, whatever you were certain of. Someone will dig up the fragments of our world and try to piece together what we believed, and what we feared, and what we thought was waiting at the end. The Sumerians left them a note, 5,000 years early, and maybe the only question that ever really mattered is the one they were already asking, in wet clay, at the very start. What do you leave behind that the gates cannot take? And think about what the tablet is doing to you right now. For a few minutes, it made you take death seriously. Not as a phrase on a sympathy card, but as a thing with a shape, a thing you will actually meet one day. That was the point. Not to frighten you, to make you look. Because a person who has truly looked at the end tends to hold the middle, this life, the one you are in, a little differently, a little more awake. The scribes could not stop the gates from coming for them, but they could make sure that whoever found their words would stop and feel the weight of it. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't the kind of channel that's going anywhere. We put out something like this every single day, the version of the story that survives contact with the actual evidence. Subscribing keeps you in that loop. And if this one stayed with you, send it to 5 people who'd sit through something this long with you. Not everyone will. Some people do. Leave a comment, a real one. Tell me what part of this actually surprised you. And tell me what civilization, what forgotten site, what quiet piece of hidden history you want us to look at next. We'll be here tomorrow, still digging.